So I lead the wonderful team we have here in Oklahoma for the Boeing Company. There's a fancy title that goes with that. It's the Vice President of Aircraft Modernization and Modification. But essentially all of the work that we do here in Boeing, I lead that effort. And it runs from our bomber fleets to our airborne surveillance fleets to our executive transport fleets. And I've had a nice long career with Boeing, and I've gone from different sites, different locations. I moved back here just in January to take on this position. But I've been in Oklahoma before for the last, previously, about 20 years. But my Boeing career has taken me to all different sites across the country, and from different types of jobs, to an engineering leader, to a program management leader. So I've had the opportunity to see lots of different things. And one of the things we talked about on our table, and I asked that question, how many have actually seen a space launch or a rocket launch? Because that was one of my previous jobs, was out in Florida, working on our commercial launch business. So with all of those roles, what we're going to talk about today, diversity and inclusion. And I just wanted to say what that means to me. And especially as the leader of a large site, you know, obviously diversity is really about what we have. You know, you can see diversity. You can see gender, you can see ethnicity, you can understand folks that come from military backgrounds, civilian backgrounds, all different things about diversity. But what we do with that team and how we show that we are inclusive and how we build environments that take advantage of that great diversity so that we are all better for that diversity is really the big part. So you hear us talk about, in the past we always talked about diversity, now we talk about diversity and inclusion. Right, because it's more than just bringing together the different folks, but then taking advantage of those talents that we have and how we utilize them in an environment where everyone feels valued and everyone feels that what they bring to the table is important and valued. So I believe we have a great panel that's going to be able to talk about that and personally what it means and how they use it in their organizations. You know, so it is that. It's both personal in all of our lives, and then from a business perspective, it has another meaning, but they're all united together. So with that, I will ask our panel to come and take their spots and introduce themselves. We need to introduce it there. So we'll go in the order that they're sitting. So Sandra, would you like to go first?
Good afternoon. My name is Sandra. I am a diversity and inclusion executive with Bank of America, and I'm excited to be here with you today. Do you want us to talk a little bit about
Yourself and what it means to you.
So at Bank of America, I am responsible for leading our global strategy for our company. We're a company of about 214,000 employees, with about 200 here locally in Oklahoma City. We've been on our diversity and inclusion journey for about 20 plus years, so I'd like to say we're mature in the process. However, we know that there's still much work to do. What diversity and inclusion means for me is quite simple. Diversity is the mix. Inclusion is how you make the mix work. And so I'll leave you with that because I know we have plenty of time to dialogue.
Thank you so much. General?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the Commission, the Ethics Commission, for inviting me to participate and allowing me to bring some of my diversity and inclusion warriors with me. We're really looking forward to the discussion today, and I hope it's worth everyone's while. I'm currently serving as an Assistant Adjutant General for the Oklahoma Army National Guard. I've been in the Oklahoma Army National Guard for 30 years now, and was recently promoted to that rank, and I am the first female to serve as a general officer in the Oklahoma. This is a significant achievement for myself, but it's really an important our organization, and I'm very cognizant of that and looking forward to making a difference in this role. But for me, my background is HR. I'm a Human Resources Management Officer. That's my specialty, my job skill in the military, what I was trained for. Of course, I've served in various types of units in different positions, but that's been my forte. And in that role, I've been a diversity and inclusion warrior, champion, advocate all of my career. And at a very young time in my career, I got to go to some really great training, becoming an equal opportunity advisor. And so those foundations, those principles you get that young in your career, you take with you forever. And so I was fortunate to do that. And so for me personally, why it's so important is as a female military officer, there have been so many times I've been the first and or the only female in a position or in a role or at a certain rank. So there have, yes, been many times where I felt marginalized or ignored or isolated or tolerated or, treated like an anomaly, which is fine. We learn to deal with that. I wouldn't say it's fine. But that's why it's so important, because what I learned through my training, but also from personal experience, is how important inclusion is for everyone. And how it is so important to allow people to have a sense of belonging, to know that their work matters, that it's important, and that they know that they can contribute, they can participate, and they can reach their full potential. So again, thanks for having me here, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Jr., and I am the CEO of Energy FC. We are the local professional soccer team. And my kind of experience and journey with diversity and inclusion began a long time ago. Two people there in the audience that were kind of part of that. Has been part of that journey over the years. And one of them being Robert Davenport at OU was my AD, is the AD of OU, but he was my coach also when I started college, and which really started opening my eyes. And from that standpoint, kind of different worldview. I grew up in Piedmont, in a small farming community that was not representative of diversity in Oklahoma. And so my perspective was a little bit skewed growing up, but over time, it began to develop my perspective. And was able to, through a lot of different moments, maybe we have an opportunity to talk about those a little bit later, really discover why diversity and inclusion is so important, and how it makes us special as a community, and how it can really change, make us different than anywhere else in the country, especially here in Oklahoma City. And we've tried to interweave those values through all of our companies, and one being Energy FC, and one of our key value for us is unity. And we stake our really the core value around that one emphasis within the team framework, and bringing all types of people and demographics together. And how my definition of diversity and inclusion is not much different than Sandra's. I would look at it as a recipe. So the ingredients is the diversity, the vast diversity of ingredients that you put into a dish, and then the inclusion is how you mix those together and how you cook it to make it a masterpiece. And I think we have the ability to do that here in Oklahoma City.
Okay, thank you very much. So as you can see, we have a great panel that's going to be able to bring different perspectives. They told you personally what diversity and inclusion mean to them. We want to shift a little bit and say we know it's all personal, and now we're going to talk about it from an organizational perspective. And we heard a little bit of that, and I'll just say a little bit from a Boeing perspective. And I know each company has, what they do with it. For us, we call it One Boeing. It's about being united as one, where everyone has a voice and it's important to listen to that voice. But a big part of this is it needs to be intentional. We talk about it and we hear the words, but we need to see the intention, and that starts from the top down. So as I step into my new role leading the Oklahoma City site, I know that I have to set that stage so folks know That, it's not just words on a chart that we have when you come into a conference room, right? That I get it, I feel it, my actions show that we value every individual and every input that they have, because we know that that's going to give us the better solutions to our problems, right? We don't all know everything, and we know we have to rely on the teams that we have, and that diversity always gives us the better solutions. So when we look to that, I'll go back through the panel and ask them from an organizational perspective, what are the things we need to do to show that we value diversity and inclusion? Sandra?
Yeah, so I'd say, first of all, it has to start from the top. It has to start with the leader of your organization, and that leader of the organization really setting the tone and tenor for how they're going to lead when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I agree, it's action. It's not just having the dialogue or the discussion, but it's the action that follows that dialogue and discussion. And honestly, you can't be what you can't see. So if I don't see people at the top who reflect me, then it makes it harder for me to think that I have the ability to achieve what it takes to be there. And so it's important that when you think about your diversity and inclusion strategies, that it does start with your leadership. There are 4 reasons why you really should engage in diversity and inclusion. So that's the business case, right? So I'll talk a little bit about the business case. But what I want you to do once I talk about the business case is just understand it is just simply the right thing to do. And the business case should be the secondary reason why you do what you do. But for us, at our company, one of the things that so there are a couple of things. One of the things is companies who engage in diversity and inclusion, whether it's a company, an organization, once you've established your strategy, those companies outperform other companies by 40%. 40%. So it's a bottom line dollar that you impact when you have a diversity and inclusion strategy, not just on paper, but when you execute it flawlessly. The second thing is that your associates are more engaged. So what you should see when you have a strategy, if you do an employee satisfaction or organization satisfaction survey, you'll find that your associates should score 7 points, at least 5 to 7 points higher for those that are engaged in diversity and inclusion efforts. Because that's the trend. That's the industry trend. When you have engaged employees, right, your employees, you can get the best from your brightest. And what does that in turn do for your clients? Well, it increases and enhances your client's experience. And your clients want to do business with you, and they bring more business to you. And not only that, but clients want to see people who look like them and want to do business with people who reflect them, who reflect their values. Right? So what I'm not saying is, if I'm an African American female that I don't want to do business with a white male, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is if I'm an African American female and I'm looking at your business, I want to see people who look like me reflected in your leadership, reflected in your employee base. The last thing is innovation. Diversity and inclusion allows you to be able to innovate more because you have different people with varying backgrounds and experiences coming together to solve an issue or a problem. And so the innovation starts there. And that doesn't mean that we all have to look different to have different experiences, right? It just means that we need to value the differences in all of us and think about those collective experiences. Because I promise you, if you have all the same type of people sitting in a room, they're going to be limited in their thinking. I want you to think about the exercise you did earlier, what you have in common and what makes you different. And I think what you'll find is we have more in common than what we have different. But those commonalities, those experiences are what's different. How I got to that point. In our group, we all asked, do we all fish? And all of us fish, right? And that was interesting, that all of us had gone fishing. But the reason why I fish is totally different why one of my cohorts at the table might fish, or what led me to get to that experience is totally different. So it still allows us to be able to innovate. Does that make sense? Awesome. I'm passing on.
I want to know why you fish.
Because my grandmother fished and she would take us fishing. I don't like fishing, but I like eating fish.
say it's the right thing to do. And it's important that we reflect the nation and the communities that we serve. And so we always keep that in mind in our diversity efforts, trying to seek to be more representative of our communities. But also it's part of our core values, dignity and respect. Throughout the military, we're taught that from day one and instilled into us those core values. So that's the first part. And then with the business case, I would say it's a strategic imperative for us. Because right now there's a talent war going on, and as many of you may know, that the military is far behind because the population out there that's even eligible to join the military has diminished quite a bit, and is doing so every day, be it physical or mental conditions or standards that have to be met, and just the challenges of military life and attracting people to the military. So we're in a talent war, and we already have significant hurdles. So we have to be able to, tap into every market and have an inclusive environment that people want to join. A lot of times we've in the past made excuses, when we look at and I'm going to use females again in the military, because I've probably been guilty of it myself, of saying that, females just don't have a propensity to serve in the military. That's why we can't get them to come, and why we can't keep them. They just don't want to serve in the military. And sometimes we, got to hold ourselves accountable for that statement, because the military is a great organization, and it's served, to be a vehicle for so many people to, get a great career and to do things that they might not have been able to do. And so there's no different from females, and we should be, attracting them. They want to serve places where they know they're going to be treated with dignity and respect, and they're going to be given opportunities to reach their full potential. So that's where the inclusion part comes on for that strategic imperative for us. And then, of course, the other thing is it's just the ever-changing roles that we need in the military. And there's so many historical examples of when we recognize that, we needed combat multipliers, situations that maybe we weren't using people that we did use. Historically, you can think of the code talkers from World War I, World War II. You can think of the Tuskegee Airmen and the Women's Army Corps. All those groups that maybe were being excluded and not being allowed to participate and contribute. And then when it became an imperative, we recognized that, and we continue to strive, and we continue to do those things, and we're not perfect, but we will continue to do that. So, and then the last thing is just, it's so important because when we come in the military, we're all wearing our uniform, we have this shared identity, and we have a very defined value system that we take on. But we also still bring all our other values and our beliefs and our characteristics and our backgrounds with us that we brought up with. And so sometimes those create tensions, and we need to be able to recognize that and deal with those tensions, and diversity and inclusion is one way we do that by open communication and overcoming that by just what it does is it helps us decrease those potential conflicts while also increasing our capabilities to build teams and to be more effective and be more ready for our mission. So again, military, right thing to do, and definitely a strategic imperative.
For us, in the business that we're in, it does two things. First of all, it's about teamwork and having our people rely on each other, and it's also about competitive advantage. And not necessarily from an employment standpoint of hiring, but competitive advantage with the other entertainment options that are within our community. The first one, it's all about teamwork and reliability, because I find that when our team members understand the most that they can about each other from different perspectives, we've created a family. And that family will rely on each other in the worst of times, the best of times, and the worst of times. And so when you're talking about putting an event on 17 times or 18 times now a year, that is going to be close to a 20-hour day, they have to rely on each other, because we run a small shop, and so they have to rely on each other during those time frames. It's not easy, and sometimes you're working 7 days a week instead of just 5 during the season, so it's pretty difficult. And you're trying to accommodate both, the team aspects of your business, but also 5,000 people, 6,000 people on any given night during that stand, so it's taxing, and it's in the 100-degree heat, you're really you're working very hard. And there are going to be flares. There's going to be moments of tension where people are going to get upset with each other. But it's exacerbated when you don't have that internal family type of atmosphere. It can melt down pretty quickly, which can be very damaging to your business. And so we really focus on concentrating on celebrating our diversity within the groups, each other's histories, past experiences, and challenges, and creating an era of vulnerability amongst the team where they can begin to really trust each other, and trust each other with their respective work lives, and then it further extends out into their personal lives. And when we do that, we also find that when you bring that perspective, it gives you an openness to the people that you're serving on a game-to-game basis. And so what that looks like, you begin to take on your client's perspective or your customer's perspective when they come through the door, and begin to put yourself in their shoes, because you've already done that within your own family team and teamwork framework. And so you begin to see through the customer's eyes, what do they want to experience? You begin to have more interaction with them, and it gives you a lot of ways to be innovative, to your point, to then establish new programs and say, hey, we need to try this because this will be a value to our constituency. And it becomes very, very valuable, and we've had multiple things that we've tried to develop within our own program through having that experience, and that's how it becomes valuable in the organization.
So I think we've heard from the panel the strategic imperative. I just want to go back to something that Sandra said, because I think that's really, really important, right? And I'll refer it back to Boeing. If you were to look at our board of directors and our leadership teams a number of years ago, it was all white male. You look at it today, it is not all white male. It is reflective of our customers, of our people, and it really does send a message. And so starting at the top, people being able to see that we're walking the talk and intentionally making those changes really does make a big difference. So now let's talk about diversity and inclusion. You have to have good character traits that we all need to cultivate. And being human beings, sometimes we have lapses. We're not all perfect. So what are some of the common barriers that keep us from achieving inclusiveness? Sandra?
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts on this. And so number one, I'll say, I think it is a lack of, so I'll say fear, right? Sometimes it's fear of not really understanding what diversity and inclusion is all about. I think that gets in the way. We recently embarked on a study where we're doing white male advocacy. And one of the things that we're hearing from our white male counterparts is really they feel sort of left out of the conversation. Because I believe there is this misconception out there that diversity and inclusion is it's a replacement strategy. It is not. We need everybody at the table. Diversity and inclusion is only there to level the playing field and to say if you can achieve it, I can achieve it. And what it does is it opens the doors for us both to compete for that position or that level, right? Compete fairly. And that's all we're saying. It's not a replacement strategy. It's not me or you. It's about me and you. So I think sometimes it's that fear of misunderstanding really what diversity and inclusion is. And I do think there have been times where we have left certain segments out of the equation. We all have some level of diversity about us. We're from different places. We were reared differently. Diversity and inclusion is not just about what you look like. It is about your experience as well. So let me start there. The other thing is we need to open it up and have more what we're terming courageous conversations. There are lots of things happening in the world around us, and it has changed drastically from what it was just 3 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, yesterday. Every day it appears that something new and different is springing up. Maybe it's not new and different, maybe it's resurrected from before. But I think you have to embark on what I like to term, or what we're calling at Bank of America, courageous conversations, the ability to have conversations about things that were taboo at one point. So such as your political beliefs, such as religion, race. There are times that it's very difficult for people to say Black, African American, white, Latino, Hispanic. It's easy to say men and women, but sometimes it's very hard to say those other words. And so I think it's important that we move past those types of barriers, be inclusive of everyone in the conversation, and make sure that we are holding courageous conversations in a safe environment where people can express themselves. It is no longer good for someone to come in. Every day we start a meeting. I remember after a couple of the shootings that had happened, we came to work the next day. We start every meeting the same way in our company. Who's got recognition? That's every meeting. We start with recognition. But that day, it was different. And I don't think sometimes we realize what people are carrying with them every day when they come to work. What you talked about, covering. Trying to be something that you're not, to try to fit into some culture that is always, that you feel is not always accepting of you how you are. That takes a lot of effort and energy, and it's called covering. And you cannot get the best from your bodies if you're constantly worried about being a female, not measuring up. What does my hair look like? What's my nail color? Is this too loud? Can I wear this? Can I say that? That is exhausting. And by the time you get out in the house, you're already tired. And you ain't even got to work. So it's important that you can show up and be your authentic self. It's important. Now, be your authentic self within the confines of the vision and values of your company. I'm not trying to change who you are. You can believe what you want to believe. That's not what we're saying. What I'm saying within the confines of the vision and values of your company. And so for us, those days, we started off the same. Who's got recognition? When people were sitting around and they were toiling with what had just happened, it was polarizing. And our country has become more polarizing. And we never thought to step back and to have the conversation. And so we received some feedback from a few of our associates, and we embarked on courageous conversations about 3 years ago. But we bring those types of conversations into the workplace to allow people to express themselves, to gain understanding. Not to change your mind, but just to offer more understanding and transparency. I'll leave you with this one last story, and I promise I'm going to be quiet and pass the mic. I went to a conference, the CUPO. I don't know if anybody's ever been to the CUPO before. It's a higher education conference where they have all these colleges and universities come, and I was speaking about diversity and inclusion. And their keynote speaker was from Shades of America. Has anybody seen that? Shades of America? It's on CNN. Well, the guy who does, I can't remember his name, but he was speaking. Yes, the guy with the big hair, I can't remember his name, but he said something that was so crazy in the meeting. He said, I want all the white people to stand up and say, I'm white and I'm proud. You would have thought you would ask them to say the worst thing in the world, because here I am, sitting there looking at my white counterparts going, ooh, what's going to happen next? You don't get up and say you might be proud. And he looked at me and he said, can I say that? I said, yes, James Brown said it for me. I'm black and I'm proud. And what was interesting is it was so uncomfortable. Why? We all should be proud of who we are. We all should be proud of our heritage. And we all should be able to stand up and say who we are and say we're proud to be that. That doesn't mean that you're saying that you don't like or not for someone else. It just means that you love the culture and the character that you have and what you carry. So, white people, you have my permission. You might be proud.
I hope you guys are taking some good notes. That's awesome. So, I think talking about subconscious biases is a barrier that we all have, and sometimes I know in my experience, I have to work hard on and not getting so caught up in my own, how am I being treated, and being paranoid or just so aware of it. And she said it's exhausting, you know, because you get focused on that sometimes and you might see things that aren't really there. Or you need to give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes. And then there are times that you have to confront it. And so that's kind of where I'm at a lot is when are those times? And now that I'm in such a visible role, and I have to be very stringent on making sure that, you know, in the military we have certain protocols, and I have to be very aware that I'm treated the same as male officers of the same rank or more even. So there's times when I've had to confront that just on that, from that aspect. There's other times where it's kind of humorous things. I've, you know, been encountered since I made full bird colonel. I've had, you know, been at ceremonies in uniform, and I'll have an elderly veteran, retiree male walk up and, you know, want to hug because he's never hugged a colonel before or a general before. And it's like, I don't see my male peers getting, you know, asked to do the same thing. And, you know, it's kind of awkward because I'm a pretty friendly and approachable person, and, you know, my first response is to hug somebody. You know, I'm really having to be conscious of that. And, you know, anyway. So, but those are the humorous ones that you have to kind of, you know, you have to know when you just need to educate someone or, you know, redirect them while maintaining the dignity and a good positive relationship. There's other times where I've had to confront it head on, just not so much again for me personally, but before, you know, for everyone I represent, men and women, and the protocol and the military customs that, you know, we adhere to. Times where that I have to take my seat at the table, that I don't need to be hanging back, or I don't need somebody else to take my seat at the table. And so I've had to confront that head on more than once, unfortunately. You know, I'm shocked sometimes at the response, but it sends a message, and I know what I'm dealing with then. But for the most part, my peers are supportive of that when I do, you know, have to do that. So, but again, I have to work hard to not just get focused on am I being excluded or treated differently. What it makes me do, and I've called myself on the carpet on this recently, is, you know, when I was getting frustrated and feeling like I was not, you know, getting consulted or not part of the inner circle or not, you know, things were happening and I was being left out or excluded. And then I started realizing and looking around at my own team, under me, my subordinate leaders, and thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing the same thing to a couple of them? You know, because I'm gravitating towards, you know, 2 or 3 that I'm closest to just because of proximity of office space, but also we've been together, worked so many times over, you know, the past years, and one of us will deploy together, we know each other better, I'm comfortable, and I realized that what I'm so mad at my, you know, bosses for doing, you know, and maybe I'm doing the same thing and I don't even know it. So a lot of times we get focused on just the gender, the things that we can see, the gender, the color, the national origin, ethnicity, when there's so many other factors in there about diversity and inclusion that we got to remember. It's not just all those visible things, it's the invisible that we need to make sure everyone feels that inclusion. So that's something that you have to continue to work on. And what I recommend, what I do is just stop and think, does everyone on my team look just like I do? Do they talk just like I do? Do they think just like I do? Do they do the same things I do? And really think about that. And am I talking to only the same 2 or 3 people every day?
So I'm going to try to not get too excited here and not get on the soapbox because I've been waiting for this question. My wife over here is like, oh gosh. Didn't care about it. She was Palomar, chief architect for some of my transformation over the years in terms of diversity and inclusiveness. This subject is so interesting to me, this question is so interesting to me because it's not about, the way I see it, and it's from my perspective, being the only white male here, it's not about what the barriers, well, I guess it is considered a barrier. The primary barrier for us as white men is our lack of acknowledgement of our contribution to the problem and understanding. All the things that you just said, the 10 items that you just listed off that you have to worry about being an African American woman in the workplace, and you list off every day. I don't worry about none of those things. I barely would wear a tie if I didn't have to. It wasn't in my dress code. But I don't worry about them when I walk out the door. I don't have to think of those things. Why? Because I'm a white man. And we don't acknowledge the privilege that we have within our society. In fact, we're threatened when anybody brings it up. We don't have the conversation. We don't lean into the discomfort. The discomfort's there for a purpose. It's a reason. Because we know something's wrong and we need to address it. We need to sit down and have a conversation about it, be mature about it, and realize that other people have different perspectives. With a system that's been created, in a large part of the last, really, in our country, over 200 years. And I run into this more and more often. The first time the light went off for me was not related to this, but somewhat related to this. It was related to a training that I went to about men's role in violence against women. 90% of violent crime in this country is committed by 10% of the population. Make sure I said that right. Sometimes I get that wrong. So, and the 10% of the, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. 10% of that violent crime are considered. I don't think I got that right. Yeah. The point being is 90% of violent crime is committed by males. There's this epidemic, and we as men aren't doing anything about it. We're not a voice at the table. We're leaving it up to the other gender to have the conversation and deal with it. That opened my eyes, and it opened my eyes to so many other subjects in our society where we as white men are not part of the conversation. And we're not part of the conversation because we're not being allowed part of the conversation. My opinion is we're not part of the conversation because we're not stepping to the table to have the conversation. Because we've created our own system. We've created our own system that protected us over decades. And until we understand and realize that, we're not going to get any further in this discussion. We have to step up to the table, have the courage to have the conversation, and not realize it's not against me against you or us against them. It's all of us. It's you and I. How are we going to come together and push ourselves as a society to progress down this path? Because this is not, it's interesting that there's a book about Frederick Douglass up here. I was just reading on some of his speeches. He was dealing with this right after the Civil War, right after Lincoln's assassination, and having these same discussions. Have we made some progress? Sure, some progress, but we're not near as far down the path as we should have been, as we should have been from 1865.
A really good discussion, and we had a little conversation before we came up on the panel. Back to what all three have said. Are we setting the environment where you're comfortable coming to work, now within the bounds of a professional environment, but being able to be you, right? And all of the things that you bring to that. I think back to when I started my career, and I wanted to look like the white male, to the point where at some point, I think we were wearing suits and ties. Remember that? And it's like, that wasn't me, but that's what I thought I had to do in order to fit in. And what are we still doing, whether it's subconsciously, consciously, that still makes people feel that they need to look like that? And what we were talking about is some of the leaders, as I mentioned, my boss is a female, my boss's boss is a female. And we had a huge meeting, and she felt comfortable enough in who she was, which would have been taboo years ago, where she cried. She got so emotional over a topic, she says, okay, I can't hold it in, I'm going to cry. And we're like, that's okay, right? To be who you are, present yourself as who you are, and not hold back those emotions. And we talked about that with the general, the same type of thing where she said with the hug, you want to show that, but yet you're thinking all the things in your head of, nope, that doesn't look professional. So how do we find those environments and that balance that enable us to be us, right? Still show who we are, and recognize that as being an important part of our culture. So with that, there's one question that we're going to throw out there, we debated, and said, what effect has the Me Too movement had on our workplace dynamics? Sandra.
Yeah, so for us, it really, we had to step back and really think long and hard around how would we message this within our company, and what would we do and say. So of course it starts with the policy reviews. at your employee relations. We wanted to look at how many complaints, where were they coming from. And then finally, but not least, is the CEO came out with his sort of top 5 things that he wanted us to think about. And for him, one of those things is if you have a relationship with a subordinate, whether it is voluntary or not, consent or not, you will no longer work for our company. I think that says it all. You will no longer work for our company. You will be fired. Because in his eyes, it's hard for that person to, because of the positional power that you have, you need to use better judgment. And that is something that as a company, we are really taking a hard look at. It's one thing to make a mistake, but what we're finding is that people just have lack of good judgment. And lack of good judgment could cost us everything. And so that's really the effect, I think, for us. It's caused us to take a hard look and to also think about making a firmer stance and letting everyone know in our company that, you know, a whistleblower policy, you know, you can call, you can raise the red flag, you will be protected at all times. It's not about blaming the victim or blaming the man. It's about looking at the situation and getting to the truth. But I think people pretty much got the message with his first statement. And I believe that set it off for us. So those were a couple of things that's how it's impacted us as a company.
Well, you know, in the military, we've been dealing with sexual assault and sexual harassment for a number of years now, doing a lot of training. We focus on it, we talk about it, but it's still happening. And it's just, you know, mind-boggling. Sometimes when you hear about a case, you know, whether it's a minor infraction or it's just an actual full-out assault, I'm just shocked that it's still happening. So it's something we're dealing with. Everyone knows that. It's in the news. But the Me Too movement, I think, talking about it a little more maybe, women, females are talking to each other more. There's some great resources out there, books that are empowering women. And we're taking some steps to do some more empowerment in our aviation community. They've initiated a program called the Female Empowerment Committee, and it was developed by a male, a sergeant major, who wanted to talk about these issues, and it was very brave on his part, and I'm hoping to maybe expand that to some other organizations in the force. But the one thing about the Me Too movement, I've heard some people remark about maybe males now are afraid to be with females or to have close working relationships, or even travel, or be in a meeting one-on-one, or even enter into mentoring relationships because there might be a perception or they might get accused of something. And that, you know, that's concerning. And while that, we need to listen to those concerns and address them and have a dialogue about it. But my concern is that we go too far with it and men just check out that, you know, really what they need to be doing on mentoring everybody, but they use that fear and you know, that we don't use it as an excuse or we go too far at saying, well, we just can't have, you know, relationships with our female coworkers, or I can't mentor a female subordinate leader because of those perceptions. But it reminds me, when I think about that, it reminds me of times in the Oklahoma Army National Guard where, you know, we were very heavily combat armed state, so not very many females out in some of our units. And when we would have a complaint or an allegation of some kind of sexual harassment or just inappropriate behavior, sometimes we excused it by saying, well, they're just not used to being around females. You know, they're not around females out there in that unit. And it always, you know, it just didn't hold water because it's like, well, I don't know where they live or where they come from or where they work, because we are National Guard, and, you know, most of them aren't full-time, so they have other jobs where they go to school and they live somewhere. I'm pretty sure there's probably females that they deal with at the grocery store and other places. So we kind of, you know, you have to blow that out of the water. And so I want to make sure that we do this, not the same way that we do, but that we talk about it. And we have a dialogue and we make men feel safe in maintaining those relationships, because we need mentors. I need to be able to travel with my peers, my boss, my fellow generals to Washington, D.C., to other events, and be able to be in the car, and let's go out to dinner at night because we're, at a remote location and not worry about it, and get the same kind of mentoring and interaction with them, my male peers and counterparts. And so it's a concern, and we do need to address it.
Yeah, and I apologize, Bob, but I'm a moderator, so I got to keep us on track. And we're really at the end of our time, but I want to give each panelist I'm getting the signal over there, and I'm watching their watch. But if you just each take a very short one thing as we leave that everyone can do. And I'll remind you, in your handouts, there's lots of suggestions and things, so take a look at that. But if each be real briefly, just if there's one thing we can do to promote diversity and inclusion, what would that be?
Yeah, so my one thing will be, if you take a look in your packet here, there is a leader bias check, which was mentioned about unconscious biases. What I would say is review that in moments that matter. Think about the moments that matter for your organizations. Hiring, promoting, retaining, board appointments, developing. Anytime you go into that where it's going to impact people, think about doing a bias check quickly to leave your bias at the door before you make any decisions.
Jenna?
I just go back to the being deliberate and being intentional. And because if you're not being deliberate and intentional, then you're really risking that you are unintentionally excluding someone. So just be deliberate and intentional, and ask yourself those questions that I asked before. Does everyone look like me? Are they thinking the same way? What I do?
I would agree with both of the things that they said. I think they're fundamentally important, especially as leaders in the organization. And it does start at the top. For me, more practical application, direct application, something that you can utilize. And I'm still learning on this journey. So recently, for the last year or two, there was a study that was done a while back called the Lakeisha and Jamal study. I don't know if you're familiar with it, where they blind sent out resumes out to employers, and it was blatantly obvious that at a 10-to-1 to 15-to-1 ratio that they essentially put African American names on top of the resume versus white names, and it was blatantly obvious that, and statistically, that the white counterparts got 50% more callbacks. And so one of the ways we wanted to enact a policy was to, when we get our resumes in, and it took some practice because people tend to just grab them and start looking at them, is to mark out any potential things that could direct it in a biased nature. So mark out the names, mark out addresses, where they live, all those things. So you're looking at the person's qualifications. And it takes some training and getting people used to it, especially when department heads are accepting their own resumes. But once you get them into the habit, you'll be fascinated by the results, because you don't realize it, but there can be very real unconscious biases within the company or organization you're in right now. So that's just one practical application.
That's called blind resumes, by the way. And that study, both resumes were the same. The names were just.
I want to thank our panel. Let's give them a hand. They did great.